Greetings, listeners worldwide. Jordan River here, back with more Growcast, a full spectrum podcast. Today we have a brand new guest. That's right, we have CBG Gurus joining us. They are working out in the East Coast, working on ancillary cannabinoid breeding. We're going to talk about hemp, CBG, CBD, and making extraction from different types of these different type of ratio cultivars. So very excited. I know you're going to love today's episode. Before we jump into it though, shout out to AC Infinity. That's right, acinfinity.com. Code GROWCAST15 now saves 15% across the board at AC Infinity. They're trying to send you directly to their website now, and we are encouraging you to use code GROWCAST15. You'll save 15% no matter what you buy, and orders $99 or more get free shipping. So go straight to acinfinity.com and use that code GROWCAST15 to get yourself a new Grow Tent kit. AC Infinity has everything you need to succeed. They've got great build quality. They've been making fans for a long time, best fans in the game. And now you can save 15% on all of their awesome items with code GROWCAST15. Once again, it's acinfinity.com. Use code GROWCAST15 for 15% off. Free shipping on orders, $99 or more. And if you're still ordering on Amazon, use code GROWCAST for 5% off there. Thank you to AC Infinity, and thank you guys for using our codes. It supports AC Infinity, it supports us, and we appreciate you helping keep the lights on. All right, everyone, let's get into it with CBG Gurus. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, as always, I urge you to share this show. Turn a grower onto Growcast. Spread the show. Really helps us out. Or turn a smoker into a grower by convincing them to pop their first seed. It's the best way you can help us in our mission of overgrow. Make sure you're subscribed. Go to growcastpodcast.com. There you will find everything. The seeds, the classes, the membership. Huge thank you to the members for making this whole thing possible. Be sure to check it out. Today, we're back on the line. We have a brand new guest on Growcast. Very excited to talk to this individual about ancillary cannabinoids. You know, we hear a lot about testing, revealing different types of cannabinoids that play into our very nuanced cannabis experience. Things like CBG, things like THCV, these ancillary cannabinoids that can have a huge medicinal effect. And there's so much to go over when it comes to cultivating them and processing them. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today with our guest from the CBG Gurus. He's the co-founder and CEO. Shawn is with us from CBG Gurus. What's up, Shawn? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Out here on the deck, overlooking the field on this beautiful day in Connecticut. So really excited to talk to you and tell everybody a little bit about what it is we're doing here. How you been? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Doing very well since we last spoke. You know, we did a pre-interview and I was very interested in the work that you're doing, Shawn. Before we get into like CBG as a compound and working with it and turning it into hash and rosin and this sort of stuff, why don't you give the audience a bit of an introduction on yourself? What brought you into cannabis? And then what brought you from the cannabis world in general, specifically to CBG and ancillary cannabinoids?
Sure thing. So I have been pretty passionate about cannabis for quite a while. I actually started my college career trying to pursue pre-med, and I was a Division I athlete, so I had to stop my use for a little while. And then I really wanted to just focus on school more, so I, stopped being an athlete, focused on school, and, some Google ad showed me a program for a medicinal plant chemistry major at Northern Michigan University.
Whoa.
A new program, so I applied there on a whim. Happened to get in, moved across the country, never had been to the Midwest or the Upper Peninsula, but, just kind of took a deep dive in that regard. That probably was the first step to really devoting my life to cannabis as a career. And then when I was up in Michigan, I learned quite a lot. I kind of got taken under the wing of a longtime caregiver who really taught me how to grow. And then I learned about, science aspect of it while I was in school, made some great connections. And after school, I really kind of had the option to do maybe more or less whatever I wanted. I was really young, field there in Michigan still at the time, 2021. But I decided to move back to Connecticut where I was, raised here in Harwinton, Connecticut. And our house here sits on 13 acres. We've got probably like 4 to 7 that are really cultivatable. And we're right now farming about half an acre to an acre of outdoor polyculture, mixed cannabis and produce.
Wow, that sounds incredible, man. What a story. There's a lot that I want to drill down on there, but I'll make this short and sweet. First of all, going into the kind of academia side and learning that, what did you find the difference was in the knowledge that you learned from the academic side versus working with someone like a caregiver on a cultivation? Did they both come in handy? Were they different flavors? Tell me about that.
Definitely both come in handy. I kind of like to think about it like in school, I was trained to be a scientist. And then, my homie taught me like how to start to run a grow, at least, how to work with the plants and take care of the plants. Because in school, it was a lot of classes. We did a lot of things, but the degree was really focused on training us how to use the analytical instruments. So I was, trained on like an HPLC, running different types of potency and terpene testing.
Oh, really?
But we did like birch bark extraction and, pulled the betulin out of birch bark and then ran that through the HPLC and tested, for those compounds. So I think that's what the degree was really focused on, is like training us to run these instruments, which a lot of college students don't get the experience or exposure to. And it's a really valuable skill if you're trying to work in a lab. But just having the degree and the experience kind of around that type of, learning environment and those type of people, I think really opened our opportunities to a lot of different things. I've got a lot of friends who are like on the ground floor of some grows out in Michigan. I've got friends working in labs, kind of really all across the board. So, but I think the classes trained me to kind of be a scientist and work like a scientist and think like a scientist and run experiments and have good documenting skills and all that stuff. And then, getting my hands on plants obviously was super valuable. In school, we couldn't work with THC cannabis, but we actually were allowed to work with like CBD and CBG genetics, like for our senior thesis project. I don't know if they run it any differently now, but we were individualized and we had one partner and we were more or less able to kind of choose like, what we wanted to do. So I actually grew some hemp plants for my senior thesis project in school, in the lab, which was a little bit chaotic, having a lot of other kids also trying to grow things, but definitely a learning experience nonetheless. And it was fun to, have that experience while in college. Definitely really unique opportunity.
This other guy's like, I'm cultivating powdery mildew for my experiment. You're like, no. That's really cool, man. I like the hybrid background of not just, being interested in plant science, but actually going through. I don't think a lot of growers do that / have that opportunity, like you said, to kind of go through the academic side. Sounds very interesting. How did that lead you to CBG specifically?
Well, with the degree, I think maybe my parents had a little bit more confidence in my ability to actually do something. So, because I'd been dreaming about growing a field of hemp ever since middle school. It was an out there proposal back then, but
it is an easier pitch once you have a horticultural degree. If you're talking to your parents,
right.
then yeah, for sure.
Right. So, like I said, the opportunity was there to kind of come back here and use this land that we have that I grew up on, that, my dad was just mowing the grass basically. So it was taking up his time and resources. So senior year was COVID for me. Not the best senior year college experience, but it did give me the opportunity to, spend a lot of time at home on YouTube learning about natural farming and no-till and back to Eden style of gardening. And, I basically kind of took all that stuff and decided I wanted to start a hemp farm, cannabis farm. But, hemp licenses are way cheaper than marijuana licenses. And, I had the land to do that. And it's the same skills across the board. So I was, really kind of looking forward to developing those skills. In wanting to start a hemp farm in 2020, 2021, we kind of realized the CBD market was already pretty flooded. Prices for biomass were super low. So we didn't necessarily see that as a super duper viable option for a business, long-term, even short-term. And we weren't really trying to grow biomass. We were trying to start a brand and build a brand because we saw more value in that. And we kind of ourselves, back in, say, 2019-ish, 2020, really just discovered CBG. And we decided to buy some flower online to try it out. So we tried it and We felt it. We felt the difference between the CBG and CBD or THC. I think it's definitely non-intoxicating like CBD, but I do think it's a little bit more psychoactive. So we kind of felt that difference, and we knew that, we hadn't heard about it as, longtime cannabis users. I mean, I heard about it in school, but I never, consumed a product.
Right.
So being able to have that experience and it being unique to us, we felt that it would be unique to consumers as well. So that's kind of why we wanted to drive the brand in a CBG forward manner. Of course, being a hemp brand, we do have some other products, nighttime products and CBD only products. We really try to have a little bit of everything, but we've got CBG plastered all over our banners and everything. So when we're out at events, really, it's a lot of educating consumers as to what some of these minors are and how they're different, but still beneficial and maybe different ways or similar ways.
Sure.
It's really great. Yeah.
So we have an audience of cultivators here, and I'd like to start with that information and then move it into more of the cultivation and processing side. We've had a few strains that tested for CBG that we didn't know tested for CBG. And it's interesting to look at which ones those were out of our genetic library, because they were some of the most unique ones and some of the most unique lineage. Our Ice Cream Wolfman has a really unique lineage. So I'm wondering, well, like I said, let's actually start from the beginning. You described that difference in consuming the CBG. What are the effects like for you personally? And then dovetail that into what are the effects medicinally that we know from studies and things of that nature.
Sure, yeah. So, obviously we can dive into what I know at least about the genetics and cultivating it and stuff like that too. But in regards to the consumption side and kind of some like mantras that we've come up with, we like to say that, CBG, a lot of people know CBD. So we normally say CBG is similar to CBD in that it's another non-intoxicating cannabinoid, but we prefer CBG for daytime use. We like to say it has more of an aware, uplifting, focus type effect. So sometimes, we'll say it's like the sativa of hemp. And I do find that it has more of like a mood, energy, and cognitive boosting component to it.
Whoa.
So that's why I personally prefer it for daytime use. Personally, I'll normally mix some of our CBG flower with some of my type 1 flower. And that's, if not hash rosin, that's what I'm consuming during the daytime. From, a medicinal standpoint, I guess, just like based on some research that's out there and some client feedback, most people use it for similar things to CBD, being pain and inflammation management and stress and anxiety management. But again, we prefer it during the daytime because of its kind of uplifting components. And there is a bit of research, and we have heard from, some of our customers that it's a little better potentially for things like GI inflammation, which is really great. I mean, I had one customer that told me, it was the only thing that helped his IBS, which is like incredible. And also for like neurological inflammation, has the potential to be better than some things like CBD. And I think that comes down to the molecular structure of CBG. And, it has a lot longer, more malleable carbon chains.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it can take more conformations than some of the other cannabinoids. And I think that maybe is part of the reason why it can have so many different potential uses in our bodies and actually have the ability, from my understanding, at least I think, to interact directly with both CB1 and CB2, which is pretty cool.
That's really interesting. It makes you think, you see these large studies on cannabis, and like you said, there's so many promising studies for such a wide variety of ailments. But if you think like, okay, here's this ancillary cannabinoid that not every strain produces. We've been selecting for other things, but some do produce this one. Maybe that explains some of the differences in those studies, right? And why you see such promise in some. I remember reading one, I actually pulled it up here, on CBG against brain cancer, slowing the growth of tumors. And this is a study from 2021, NCBI. Yeah, really interesting. CBG, a potential therapeutic agent in novel combined therapy for glioblastoma, which is just sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, which is brain cancer. So it's interesting. Maybe that's the secret to unlocking a lot of the medicinal aspects is like, okay, well, which are the active compounds that really affect what we're going after? And then finding the proper cultivar, really, or finding the proper ratio of application of those ancillary cannabinoids.
Definitely. I mean, I think that personalized medicine is the future of cannabis, but we really need a better understanding of how some of these things are really working biochemically before we can really, really specifically dial in on said ratios. I mean, they're still discovering compounds that, aren't even tested for that have incredible potential in how cannabis affects us when we consume it.
Exactly.
So like it's very unknown and it's a very complicated medicine, shall we say, for sure, because of its all unique compounds. But like you're kind of getting at, I think it's some of those unique compounds that really play a role in having such medicinal potential, which is why I'll always be a believer in full spec. And once we learn how some of these minors really work in our bodies and the potential pathways that they can take, then if somebody does come with an ailment, then, you'll say, okay, well, we need this cannabinoid to block this thing from happening, but then we need this cannabinoid to come in and activate this other thing so that we can prevent and cure at the same time or whatever. There's so much potential to it. And it really is, exciting for me and hopefully for other people in the industry. And I hope that, people who are just like, I don't think there's really any recreational consumers maybe, but anybody who would consider themselves a recreational consumer, I would encourage them to start playing around with some of these minors more because, I mean, shopping for THC alone, I don't think is the move. And I think that's going to change in the future, especially when people have more of an understanding. And I like to think about all these minors just kind of as like tools in your toolbox. So when you're trying to feel a certain way, like when I'm trying to feel a little high, but also motivated and energized and focused, maybe I want to smoke like 75% CBG and then like 25% of like a, very specific like tropical or piney like THC strain, type 1 strain,
Yeah, perfect. Little blend. That's where it's at. The blends are where it's at. But talk to me about those lineages that you're growing. I would love to hear, first of all, which strains are producing this type of stuff and how they grow differently, if at all.
Oh man, it all grows differently. We've been really trying to find good breeders to work with who have some like more consistent lines because it's a little frustrating, when we do farm outside and our plants are definitely in a tough environment and we like to push them hard, but it's definitely a little frustrating when you've got one plant right next to another and one goes to total mold or whatever and the other one is like totally fine. So we're putting a lot of energy this year into pheno hunting. We're running less plants, so we have clones of almost everything. So hopefully we can keep a lot of the winners around and scale those up in the future. But as far as genetic lineages and stuff like that, the CBG is a pretty unique one because it's really recessive. And I'm definitely no expert on the lineages of it, but Oregon CBD Company was probably one of the first, if not the first, big company to come out with CBG only strain, the white CBG, and that's still one of the most popular CBG strains. And according to their website, the CBG is actually produced by like a defective, I think is the word they use, THCA synthase gene.
Wow.
So they did like some crazy hunting. Apparently the white is or used to be a type 1 variety. And, they said, oh, we found the needle in the haystack, took so many years. And then, we crossed that with itself and did so much hunting to get it stable. So I think that's where probably some of the most stable true CBG genetics are. And I've heard from some other breeders that I've talked to that some of the other CBG genetics that are on the market currently, because there's not many, are just kind of like, F2s or S2s of the white that people have hunted and found cool phenos of and done some breeding work with. But I do also know that, I don't know exactly where or when it was found, but there was an Italian fiber strain that actually was found to be predominantly CBG. And that is kind of the other, I think, one of, if not the other main genetic lineages that's used in a lot of these CBG genetics.
Wow.
Because it's so recessive, you either have to find the 1 in a million within the variety that's CBG dominant, or you have to, have another CBG plant. Like you can't really cross CBG with THC and expect to get, a CBG dominant plant. It's very recessive when breeding.
That is fascinating. I know all about the white. There were 2 strains back in the day, the black and the white. And the black, I don't know if they were related, but I remember in Northern California, both of these strains, I used to tell stories about the guy who really started me into growing and Growcast and everything was my Uncle Jack, who used to smoke the black. And then there was also the white. And it's interesting because you're right. It's like a classic strain that must have just had a phenotype that kicks out this CBG. So it seems like because it's so recessive, it's more like winning the lottery than it is like, hey, you have to. That's what we were wondering about the ones that popped from our line. We were wondering, are we going to see more of that, or is this one phenotype just kind of a one-off? It seems like usually it's the latter.
Right. I'd say it's a one-off unless you're hunting and selecting for that. You're probably not going to see it around more.
Yeah, this is very interesting. How is growing these strains, not so much like the fiber varieties, but these ones like the white from Oregon Seed Co. Do you find that they feed basically the same?
Sure. So it's our first year growing the white. I honestly, everybody grows the white. So in trying to, develop like a unique brand, I didn't want to grow the white for a while, but I think they are stable genetics and there probably are some winners in there. So I finally decided this year, okay, let's try the white out. We've tried a lot of all that we could find basically from companies that looked legit on the market. And we've even tried stuff that, was sold to us as CBG, but wasn't truly, at least fully dominantly CBG. In terms of growing it, I'd say very similar to growing lots of other cannabis, looks the same. Good hemp varieties should look like and smell like and feel like and smoke like, basically any other cannabis. That's
right.
If you can have, that's kind of a test that we like to play with ourselves and customers sometimes, like the jar test, is it hemp or is it weed? And that's a fun one. But in terms of growing it, it finishes earlier generally. So if people don't know, CBG sometimes is referred to as the mother cannabinoid. So all cannabis plants actually make CBG as a precursor to all the other ones. Even THC plants make CBG and then turn it into THC. So I think that inherently makes it the CBG dominant varieties want to finish early. So those are normally our earliest finishing varieties. And it's also very, very low THC. We have no problems ever with pre-harvest compliance testing. It's under 0.3 total at finish. And from that regard, it's really great to grow. I feel like we've had maybe a little bit more powdery mildew issues with some CBG varieties than CBD. But as I was kind of saying before, it's like growing any other cannabis. You can find a winning pheno.
Sure.
And try to run that out. That's going to be bulletproof in your location. And who knows, maybe my bulletproof winning pheno is not yours out there in Colorado or whatever, in the desert or whatever,
Oh, exactly. You got to find what works in that environment, right? And I know a lot of hemp farmers run into that problem when you breed out THC and when they're trying to breed out all these compounds that do help, especially with pests. So you want to keep those terpenes around. You just don't want to pop hot. It's an interesting breeding goal.
Yeah, and hopefully in the future, the CBG terps will start to come back a little bit more. Maybe it's just like a genetic thing and how the CBG is made that, I don't know, the plant can't make as many terps or whatever, but it seems like our CBG varieties are always significantly lower in terps than our CBD varieties. I mean, most of them, I think, test under 1% or around 1%. And we've had some CBD varieties that have tested over 3%. So,
and I wonder what that is. I don't know if it's just because there's been so many less breeders working those varieties than the other. I don't know why if there's a scientific reason that the production of those two things are linked. But based on what I know about the production of those two things, you'd think you'd still be able to find strains that were just as terpy. Like you said, maybe it's just a matter of breeding more. But you're doing it, man. You are the one doing that. I see a lot of product that's on hemp shelves that is not up to par, that is not smokable. There is work to be done there, you know? And then I see some people doing it really well, and I'm like, God bless. This is exactly what we need. So it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah, we definitely try. I treat our hemp just like I would treat any other cannabis, that I'd be growing. So we do a lot
With
of
love.
natural farming, polyculture. We do a lot of KNF and making our own fertilizers and ferments and stuff like that. So we try to keep it full circle. And, we do the ice water extraction too. So we can maybe get into that, but we're more or less vertical, and we try and keep everything as full circle and regenerative as we can.
Growcast membership. Come and join the best community in cannabis cultivation. I would love to have you inside. We make growing fun and easy. If you're running into any problems in your grow, we can diagnose your problems accurately and provide you with solutions that work. The last thing you want to do is run to Google with your grow problems. There is so much bad conflicting advice out there. Come jump in our membership, jump in our plant problems channel. We will walk you through it and hold your hand and fix any problems you have. Plus, we have a thriving community for you to connect with, people to trade cuts with and seeds. We've got live streams and giveaways and contests. We've got the Grand Pheno Hunt going on right now. Someone's going to win $1,000 for hunting through a pack of our seeds. And we've got another round 2 of the Grand Pheno Hunt coming up so soon. You're going to want to get in membership just to see what it's all about and to make sure that you get in on the next Grand Pheno Hunt and all the grow challenges we have going on. You can find it at growcastpodcast.com/membership. Get on in there. You will not regret it. Send me a message that you heard about this ad. I'll even refund your join fee so you can enjoy 30 days free. And like I said, get in on this Grand Pheno Hunt. It's one of the greatest things we do. The next one's going to be even bigger, and someone's going to win $1,000 just for growing along in Growcast membership. Shout out to Hygrozyme for sponsoring the Grand Pheno Hunt. We love Hygrozyme, and they are supporting us as we make some fun contests and grow-alongs for the community, because that's what it's all about, supporting the growers, supporting the cannabis community, and making all of this easy and fun as it should be. So special thank you to Hygrozyme, special thank you to all the members and all the Grand Pheno Hunters. What are you waiting for? Come and join us. We've got the greatest community in cannabis. Growcastpodcast.com/membership. We'll see you there.
I know this next question is going to have more nuance because, like you said, these varieties pretty much grow the same. But then when you go to process them, they don't process the same, do they, Shawn?
No, they definitely do not.
What does that look like when you suck out the THC and a lot of the, I don't know, resinousness? You tell me, what is so challenging about washing CBD and CBG cultivars?
I think, from a Hashishan perspective, you'd say, well, the trichomes probably are different. So I'd have to agree there that the trichomes probably are different. It's definitely frustrating at times, for sure, because, we are definitely devoted to the solventless. That's kind of what our whole brand is built around. And like I said, we're vertical for it. So we do everything in-house. And I've learned so much, oh my God, but washing CBD it's a little bit torturous. We do everything from fresh frozen too, because that's just like what fits into our system and I think how to make the highest quality products. But it's like on average 1%, 1%ers from fresh frozen to bubble hash, not even like rosin. Oof. And I think that has to do with the massiveness of the trichomes, like just like maybe head size and just like the density of what's in the heads. I've been thinking about that a lot recently because I've had full mason jars of one type of hash and maybe one will weigh like 100 grams and maybe one will weigh like 300 grams. It's like, that's the same volume. Maybe it's even the same micron or a similar micron, but it's totally different density. So that makes me think it has to do something with like the density of what's actually being held in the trichome heads. And then from a yield perspective, also just like how the trichomes are shaped. A lot of the CBD is really greasy. Trying to get a better eye for, glove tests in the field. And I might break out some jars and try to do some jar tests on some phenos that look like maybe keepers. But a lot of the CBD is really greasy and will just like melt on your fingers. So I think that's an issue when it comes to making the hash. The CBG actually, Lord, God bless, because, we are the CBG gurus. The CBG actually washes a little better than CBD.
Oh, really?
I think my record wash has been over 2%. So, I mean, that's 100% better. Still, still not a 5 or 6%er like a good yielding type 1 variety. But I think that there's potential in breeding. And I know that there are breeders trying to rework or work in some like type 1 hashers and make them hemp strains, maybe hoping that some of the genetics that make that strain a hash strain will actually cross over, even though it'll be, hemp dominant. So I'm excited for that. And I think that the future is like maybe in like a little bit more in-depth genetic research and figuring out why these hashers are hashers and seeing if any of those genes are in the hemp. I mean, I know there's some people out there who take some really cool trichome photos. So it'd be cool to have some real close comparisons of those as well.
That is interesting that there's such a difference between CBD and CBG to begin with. And the numbers you're working with, man, that is low. That is a labor of love.
Yeah.
I imagine it solves a lot of the issues, though. Like, I imagine, let's say you're hunting through a bunch of these CBG strains, and on average, they're not turning out as terpy as some of the type 1 strains you're used to. Well, concentrating into rosin, I imagine, fixes that, right? Like, I bet the product at the end is beautiful, no?
Yes and no. Most of the hemp extract we actually keep as bubble, and that's what we use to make a majority of our edible products, like our tinctures and stuff like that are just infused with bubble hash. I mean, 1 fluid ounce, 1 bottle has got like over 2 grams of hash infused into it. And I've tried pressing some of the CBG out, not with much success. I haven't devoted too much time because we do just kind of use the bubble. And even as bubble, most of the hemp extract, the CBG is close to being retailable, but otherwise, our CBD bubble normally comes in over 1%. So it's not really sellable as a hemp product by itself. And any rosin,
it turns hot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it gets concentrated. Everything gets concentrated. So,
I didn't think about that.
yeah, and then I've made rosin, and for R&D purposes or whatever, gotten some of that tested, and I mean that came back I think around 2.5%.
Dude, that's got to be nice though. I know you can't say it's hemp compliant. I bet that's
good.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Why? That makes me so angry that you're not allowed to just sell that, because 2.5 is, come on, let's be honest, that's super mild, and that's probably a really good experience, I imagine.
Super medicinal, yeah. And I mean, to mix it again with like some type 1 stuff just increases the medicinal potential. So like I kind of said before, I think that's the future. And it's great stuff. But from a product standpoint, unfortunately, with our current licensing, it's not like necessarily retailable. We're maybe trying to figure that out. It'd be cool to get into some dispensaries or whatever. But I also have aspirations in the future of getting more into the recreational cannabis market. So yeah, I think a lot of these miners have a lot of potential in the future. Yeah.
So tell me about your strategy washing them. Does that differ at all? I know you're still like learning and experimenting, but have you noticed any difference in strategy, or do you treat it the same and you're just looking for one that doesn't yield like crap?
It's a little strain dependent. Maybe I'll do some test washes or whatever, but like, anybody who's out there who's in a facility working knows, like, a lot of this is more or less food grade. I don't absolutely run it at like super low speed for my first wash to like super gentle. I crank it up a little bit. Maybe I'll wash it a little bit more intensely, especially because it seems like some of these heads are maybe a little bit harder to break off.
Oh, really?
So I'll wash it a little bit more intensely. And I'm normally doing pretty maxed out loads. So that also just kind of normally have to wash it a little bit more intensely. And because it's food grade, again, I'm just really trying to get the maximum yield out of this stuff. Obviously, it's a 1%er to begin with. So really trying to juice it for for what I can without spending, 6 hours on a wash. We do have an osprey, so we're running, 18 to 20 kilos at once. It is fresh frozen. Who knows? Maybe I would have a little bit more success washing like really nice dry material, but the dry material washes I've done have not been very promising at all either. And we don't really have the drying space to harvest everything and dry it. So fresh frozen works for us. I'm excited to get more into pheno hunting because I think that plays a pretty critical role, even sometimes with type 1 strains that you're trying to hunt for hashers. So I think that could play more of a role than some people, and even me personally, have thought in the past. We'll just have a row of 30 plants, all from seeds, so all different phenos, because that's what hemp growers normally do, and, wash the whole row together. So in my hunting prospects this year, I've got some phenos I have my eye on, and I think I might have to, break out the jar and just see if there's any real noticeable differences or not.
Hell yeah. Pheno hunting is the best part. It sounds like you've got your cultivation systems kind of locked down. What's your favorite part of your polyculture that you have going on? Like what do you think makes your farm special?
This year it's crazy special because it's our 4th year farming outdoors. And we, since year 1, have been a USDA certified organic farm because we can do that because we're hemp and hemp is federally legal. So it's just a crop like corn or anything else. And being certified organic, at least our certification agency says that even though we're no-till and polyculture and, the best of the best or whatever, we still have to rotate. So we're allowed to only grow hemp or the same of any other crop in the same space for 3 years in a row. So this is our 4th year again. So it's our first rotational year in our main field. We've got 20 rows. So this year, 10 of those rows actually are produce. We've got rows of tomatoes and peppers and puff flowers in between every single row of hemp this year. So it really has a unique vibe this year.
You're going to create some you're going to create some spicy breeds. Some of those peppers are going to pollinate. I'm just kidding.
Dude, people always ask at the market. We're like, yeah, we grow hemp too. They're like, or like if we have our hemp banner up and we have like veggies on the table, they're like, are the veggies infused? I'm like, I was just like laugh to myself. I'm like, it's infused with the vibes of the hemp.
Is this cucumber going to get me high? It's like, no,
right.
It's just a vegetable.
No, it'll taste good though. And like in terms of something that I would give maybe as like a tip or whatever, some I'm excited about, some we're pushing harder on the farm this year than we did last year, is I actually grow sweet potatoes underneath all the hemp.
Why do you do that?
Well, first and foremost, I think there's a lot of sunlight energy and ground space that's wasted during the first, 2 or 3 months of cultivation when the plants are still tiny. So during that time, I feel like you got to have some sort of cover crop or ground cover or something, or else, the weeds just want to grow back. So our spring cover crop does take care of a lot of that. But then we form mounds of wood chips on either side of the hemp rows all the way down. And then we plant the sweet potato slips right into the mounds of wood chips.
Whoa.
And then they don't grow like regular potatoes. They grow like more of a vining crop. So they act as a really, really great ground cover. And by this time of the season, the whole underneath in between all the hemp plants is totally covered in sweet potato vines and leaves. So there's really no sunlight getting down to the soil. So it shades the soil, provides temperature management, moisture management. We're growing literally hundreds of pounds of more food in the same space. And yeah, it's great for the plants and it's great for the polyculture vibe.
That's really cool, man. It's like the Three Sisters style almost.
Not quite, because we don't want it growing up the hemp.
Right.
We make sure they don't grow on the hemp because, that could lead to some
but it fits
some
well.
airflow management issues, but they definitely cover the ground really well. And that was the main idea. I mean, there's some other crops that I've experimented with to try and dial in like my cover cropping and like just getting a good ground cover throughout the grow season. And we're kind of messing around with strawberries. That one seems to be a little bit tougher though. we kind of let some of our strawberry beds get a little bit crazy with the weeds this year. And then in the past, we've used a lot of daikon radish, and those still are growing like crazy around the field. That's an amazing cover crop. I'd recommend it to everybody. It's also called tillage radish. I've grown some radishes that are like as big as my upper leg, if not bigger. And they penetrate super deeply into the ground, feed the worms and the mycelium all through the winter. But the problem with the daikons is when they flower, all the flowers go like up into the cannabis trellis, and all the little white flowers are fragile. So when the flowers start to fall off, all the nug gets covered in these little white flowers, and it's a little bit annoying and hard to manage to go and stomp a bunch of radishes in every single row if you really go crazy with them. So I think the radish makes a really, really good fall cover crop. I might even seed some right now, although we've got some growing wild still because we just let it go to seed. But the potatoes, man, that's like a great food crop. I mean, they store for like a year, and you could just, make slips from the ones you grew last year. And it's amazing ground cover. And it also allows us to add wood chip, to the hemp rows on we'll see if we continue with it, but basically yearly basis, which like also is doing something else in the same process. Like we're not just having to wheelbarrow or tractor buckets of wood chips on top of the rows to top dress or whatever. We grow the potatoes in them for a year. And then by the end of the year, it's crazy. There's so much life and stuff going on up in the potatoes. The chip's like half broken down already. So after we harvest the potatoes, right now we just kind of like pitchfork them out the beds,
Wow.
And then we rake the mounds over into the middle of the beds, and, it sits for the winter. Basically, we do a spring cover crop and then plant it out again.
That is super cool, man. That's a real polyculture you got going on there. What about the KNF stuff? Do you do like JADAM fertilizers or like ferments?
Yeah. So the most cool thing that we do in the natural farming regard, we do KNF maintenance spray. So that's like we make all those ingredients and we foliar that on a weekly basis in combination normally with some stuff to help a little bit more with IPM. But I think the coolest thing that we do in the natural farming regard is actually in the Jadam realm of things. We, again, do the ice water extraction here in-house. So when I'm done making the hash, I basically just have an IBC tote down by the barn, and I take all my washed nug and I fill up the IBC tote, and then, I top it off with some water, and I call that nug sauce. But in Jadam terms, that's Jadam liquid fertilizer made with cannabis flower. And that nug sauce is what we use to feed our plants, this time of the season. And that really makes our system, in my mind, very fully circular, because the only thing I'm harvesting out of the field is, besides some smokable, more or less the heads of the trichomes.
That's really cool, man. I think that you've got a real kind of closed input system going on there, at least borderline. You're growing at scale. That's got to be amazing. What do you find the hardest part is to grow at scale? I'm sure it's a small team working that farm.
Yeah, there's just a couple of us with some helpers. So we've been kind of figuring out the scale issue, especially in regards to, trying to build a brand simultaneously, because I think that's the mistake a lot of people may have made in the hemp game, is just trying to wholesale it or say, okay, I'll grow 2,000 plants or whatever. So we've been trying to kind of grow as we need to. And the hash has helped out with that too, because it, helps a lot with the shelf life of these products. I mean, honestly, sometimes the veggies are harder to grow than the cannabis. And just kind of back to pheno hunting and working with good breeders and stuff like that. I think that's just so key. I mean, we do, like I said, treat it like any other cannabis. So we're, everything is on trellis, everything is pruned. And this time of the year, we're spending a lot of our time defoling, because we do everything for fresh frozen. So all the fan leaves are going to have to get pulled eventually. And we have our pre-harvest compliance testing next week. So we should be starting to harvest within the next couple of weeks here.
Jeez.
So getting ready in that regard. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nothing's super hard to grow if you have the right system. But I think the veg has been definitely a challenge for sure. It requires more maintenance than the cannabis. The cannabis, it's like growing trees. You just trees that grow every year. You just plant it and then you harvest it at the end of the year. If you're growing a bunch of tomatoes, not only do you have to prune and trellis them every week, but you also have to harvest them twice a week. And, the rain will make half your crop explode overnight or whatever, So
Oh my God.
it's a fun, interesting game that we're playing here with the polyculture. But I think we're figuring it out, and it's really cool work. And I don't know, I think definitely more cannabis farms should grow sweet potatoes under their cannabis, at least, if they're not going to grow some pretty flowers for the pollinators and maybe even some other food crops, because that's how nature intended it,
That's
everything
really
to be
cool,
grown
man.
together. And it really does not only look beautiful, but you can tell with all the insects and everything that's around. It's a good system for sure. So
Well, other than keeping a polyculture as the backbone of your farm, what other advice do you have? Maybe somebody in a nearby state or a similar state wants to get into the hemp game or the ancillary cannabinoid game. What advice would you have for them from a farming standpoint and or a business standpoint?
I mean, from a business standpoint, try to be unique. There's a lot of people out there doing hemp. So that's probably would be my biggest tip. And just get out there and tell the people about what you're doing. And then from a farming standpoint, I'd say try not to think about it like corn. Try to think about it like cannabis and like a really high value crop that has a lot of potential. And hopefully you have some experience growing some sort of cannabis. And it is very, very similar. A lot of things that I kind of already said over the past conversation, just the importance of hunting and working with good breeders who you have confidence in that are real and actually grow out their work. All the things that are applicable to growing high quality cannabis are applicable to growing high quality hemp. And don't overdo it. I don't think that the name of the game these days is biomass. I mean, I don't even try. It's impossible for me to compete with some of these 100+ acre farms that are just mowing their trees down every year, and milling it all up or whatever. And that's what gets used in all these lotions or, whatever, CBD dog treats,
Sure.
So like we're not doing that. And I think that market kind of is tapped. So, just be unique. And a lot of the other things we talked about too, with some of these other miners starting to come onto the market, I think that is going to be huge in the future. And hopefully a lot of these bigger marijuana companies are going to realize the value in what a lot of us are doing as hemp farmers. And maybe, if not getting our own licenses, which some of us want to do, some of us don't want to do, maybe we can at least work with some of these other companies and get some legit contracts. Because I mean, there's tremendous value in what we're doing. And it definitely is a valuable crop and should be seen that way. And I think there's a lot of potential with the miners to make some really beneficial products. And I think some companies are starting to realize that. So hopefully they'll work with, local regenerative farmers and, give the hemp farmers cred when it comes to making those products and selling those products. And I think that could be a big part of the future for the hemp industry, maybe is really getting some more into the rec market and some more mixed ratio product lines out there, especially as the breeding work continues and, we get to play with some variant strains and stuff like that. I think the future is exciting for sure.
Ooh, I have to ask that before we wrap the show here. Are you interested in the THCV stuff? Are you currently running anything that focuses on THCV?
I have two very unique variant strains. One of them was sold to us as a 1-to-1 CBD, CBDV, and we grew it out last year and it was not. But a friend of mine is doing his PhD kind of on cannabis genetics here locally. And I gave him like some cuts and some seeds and he hunted through it and found one that is truly 1-to-1. And then he selfed it and hunted through those seeds. And he thought all those seeds were going to be 1-to-1, but they're not because variant is also like super recessive.
Wow.
But he found one of the S1s that he made that is 1-to-1 and gifted that back to us. So we have those genetics. We only have a couple plants this year because we got it a little bit late, but I'm hoping to get maybe some smokable flower like for sale on the website and maybe do a really small test wash. And then the Oregon Seed Company, they have a pretty unique offering of Varen genetics. So the same friend who's very interested in the Varen got some of their double Durban V seeds and hunted through those and found a cut that, seems to grow pretty well. So got some access to that too. So definitely excited to be working with the Varen. It's different for sure.
Interesting. And coming out of the Durban line, that's super interesting.
Yeah, my friend's theory is that the really old school Durban, I hope I'm not butchering it or whatever, but the really old school Durban had THCV in it, like maybe a even significant percentage. But Varen is just so incredibly recessive that when you go and cross it with anything, potentially even itself, you're just going to breed that out. So,
Interesting.
all these Durban crosses don't have the effects of Durban because it's not the Durban. It doesn't have that Varen in there. It was just bred out. So we'll see, if any of this stuff really has any potential and if we can kind of throw any other genetics in the lines and make some cool stuff. But I definitely, as a guy who focuses on minors, am really excited to see the future of breeding with some of these things and see how crazy we can get with some mixed ratio strains and see what the Varen does. Nobody even knows about Varen. People ask me so what does CBDV even do? And I'm like, I don't really know.
It's magic.
They sell THCV as an appetite suppressant or whatever, but I think that's just some marketing kind of scam, nobody knows what it really does. We gotta get it in the form of the plant too, because I think that is so essential. When some of this research is done with isolate, the synthetically made, cannabinoids or psilocybin or whatever naturally existing compound you're going to test it, be doing tests on, if you make it synthetically, I think that the results are just going to be totally different. So it'll be interesting to have some genetics that can accumulate some Varen. And bro, who knows if you could have some THCV hash, it doesn't necessarily look like a hasher. It looks pretty greasy, but for the terps and for the experimental sake, I'm probably going to have to try to get at least a small load in there,
Absolutely, man. We are definitely here for it and interested in what you're doing. So I love the ancillary cannabinoid talk, and I would love to get my hands on some of that product. Maybe the next time I make it out east. I know Connecticut is a market where we do get quite a bit of love, and I'd love to, pop over and try some of that bubble hash or get you some of our type 1 seeds or something. That would be fun.
Yeah, definitely. Always love adding seeds to the bank, and always love testing things here in our system, in our environment here in Connecticut. Like I said, it's a tough environment for sure. So it's fun to put the plants to the test, and definitely would be happy to have you. Now is the time to come visit if you're ever gonna do a farm visit. I'd say things aren't as popping off during the winter time. Still a beautiful place to chill and hang out. So if you're in the area, it's also cool because we're about 2 hours from Boston and New York City. So it's a pretty nice centralized location. So if you're ever around there too, maybe we can link up.
Oh, I've been overdue for Boston for so long, though. That would be awesome.
Maybe we can have some sort of event collab or something, have to keep that in mind.
Oh, man.
I'd like to get some things going on the farm in the future. So,
I'm all about that at Growcast. We would love to do that. No, Boston's been overdue for a long time. Maybe a trip in 2025 out east again.
Yeah, we were at NECAN Boston last year. I actually spoke, and that was a pretty fun conference. That's wintertime. But yeah, definitely. I'm sure the East Coast would love to have you out here.
Oh man, I miss it. Boy, do I miss it. Well, Shawn, listen, let's get your website out there. Where can people find you and all of your awesome work?
Sure. So all of our hemp products are available on our website, which is the CBGGurus.com. And we also have got a newsletter on our website that we send out monthly. So if you sign up for that, we normally write some blogs, do some farm updates, and that also has an event schedule about where we're going to be vending. We do a decent amount of vending. Vending season is kind of starting to slow down a little bit, but any events that we will be at, besides our local farmers markets, which are also on there, will be included in that. And then if you really want to follow along, we use Instagram a lot. Normally things get cross-posted to Facebook, but the Instagram is also the CBG Gurus. And yeah, definitely check it out. We got a lot of cool stuff going on the farm right now. And as we push through harvest over the next 2 months.
Once again, thecbggurus.com. Did I get that right?
Yep.
thecbggurus.com. Go and check them out, everybody. Give them a follow on Instagram. And if you grab something or message them, make sure to tell them that Growcast sent you over there.
Yeah, and we actually set up a discount code, Growcast15, for anybody who wants to try out any of our products off the website. Use that at checkout, and that'll get you a nice little discount on some of our products.
That's nice of you to do that, man. Thank you. Go ahead and use that promo code, folks, just for you, just for listening. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. We'll be back at you so shortly with another one. That's all for today, though. This is Shawn from the CBG Gurus and Jordan River signing off, wishing you an extraordinary day. Be safe out there, everybody, and grow smarter.
That's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to CBG Gurus. Stay tuned for some more episodes coming up here soon. GrowcastPodcast.com. That's where you can find all the stuff. This Saturday is the OKCalyxx Natural Farming Immersive. At the time of this recording, there's 2 spots left. Come on down for this class in Tulsa. It's going to be amazing. Go to GrowcastPodcast.com/classes. Grab your tickets today. Before we wrap it up, shout out to Rooted Leaf Nutrients. RootedLeaf.com, code GrowCast for 20% off the nutrients you don't need to pH. They're loaded with carbon. They're going to do amazing things for your garden. It's like jet fuel and dank sauce to pour on your plant's roots. I just did a run with ProMix and Rooted Leaf, and it's one of the best runs I've ever done. Very excited about how that turned out. I know you guys love the episodes with Nick. He'll be back on soon. But if you're ready to try the best nutrients in the game, RootedLeaf.com, use code GrowCast. Don't pH ever again. Load your soil or your medium with that carbon and see the results of the magical Rooted Leaf. Code GrowCast, 20% off. Thank you to Rooted Leaf. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I'm running around. My travel schedule is almost done, and then I'll be relaxing through the holidays and gearing up for a big 2025. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your listens. Thank you to the members. I'll see you guys around. Bye-bye.
Are the veggies infused?